You're listening to the Control System Integrators Association's Talking Industrial Automation podcast, where you get to know the people that make modern manufacturing and processing possible. Now, here's your host, Tony Veroven.
Thanks for downloading the Talking Industrial Automation podcast. This is a show to help you get to know the people that make modern manufacturing and processing possible. I'll be talking industrial automation with CSIA system integrators and industry partners to get a better understanding of how they help their clients solve manufacturing and process challenges, and how they became successful in their careers. Along the way, we will touch on system integration best practices, technology, trends, and challenges. Whether you are a manufacturer, end user, supplier, or system integrator, I hope you will enjoy the insights CSIA members will bring to this podcast. In this episode of Talking Industrial Automation, I have a discussion with Meghan Pavasaris of Rivergate Marketing. Meghan and I host a webinar series on how engineers can develop their digital marketing skills. We discuss how to blog when your engineers don't write. We do refer to our slides occasionally, but it doesn't mean you can't glean some valuable information from our discussion. In fact, I find that most attendees only listen to webinars instead of watching the entire time. However, if there's something that you want to see, all of our tools, tips, and tricks that we reference in the webinar are listed in the show notes below. If you have any questions or comments, email me at podcast@controlsys.org. Our speaker today is Meghan Pavasaris. She is a marketing and communications manager at Rivergate Marketing. A data geek, Meghan enjoys analyzing and strategizing with clients to help grow their businesses. Prior to joining Rivergate, Meghan worked with aerospace engineering and electrical distribution companies before teaching elementary school for 7 years. Meghan earned a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration, Marketing, and a Bachelor of Arts in Spanish Language and Literature at the University of Connecticut. She also holds a Master of Arts in Elementary Education and Teaching from American University. She resides in Grafton, Massachusetts, with her husband and son. Please welcome Meghan Pavasaris.
Hello, everybody. It's so good to see everybody here today, and thank you so much for your patience while we started about a minute late. Today we're going to be talking about how to find content when engineers don't write. It was one of the most popular and requested topics when Tony and I did our last webinar a couple months ago. Knowing that content is important, but knowing that engineers, some of them went into engineering so that they didn't have to write. What do we do to create the content that we know that our customers need while also, not asking too much of our engineers? So today our agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about why content, why do we need to have that, and then we have 6 tips for you, and then we have a couple of tools at the end, and then time for questions. So why content? Like we said, you probably already know that content is the most important digital marketing tool that you have. The chasm between I've never heard of you and your name sounds familiar is how content is how you bridge that big gap. And it takes up to 19 times for somebody to have heard your name before they start to think of you as familiar. So you do need to have quite a bit of content for your customers to understand who you are. And we know that engineers are consuming more content. This is not one of the digital things that doesn't apply to the industry. It does very much apply to this industry. 90% of engineers are looking at more product information and data sheets, for example, than they did 5 years ago. 54% of them are reading more blogs than they did 5 years ago. So we know that engineers are going to websites, to customer websites, to vendor websites to look at the information that they have before they make a decision. So the first tip we have for you is to get your engineers ready to go is to set aside time. It may seem like a really easy kind of thing. It may seem like kind of a a silly little tip, but oftentimes if we don't make the time to do it, engineers or anybody else won't sit down and do it. So what we've done with our clients, with a number of our clients, is do blog lunches is one of the ways we do that. So it's on the calendar, it's once a month, it's food, everybody loves food. And we gather around the conference table and we all eat lunch and discuss what we're going to talk about, and then people can bring their laptops and start writing right in the same meeting. So nobody has to set aside the time or figure out the priorities. You're in the room, you're ready to go, you've set aside the time. And then the second big hurdle that we often see is topics. You get in that room, you have your pizza, and then how do you get anyone to to actually talk about the topics or to come up with something, or who's going to be the first one to stop staring at their pizza and volunteer? So I recommend having a balance of volunteer topics and voluntold topics. So you do want to solicit from your engineers because they're the ones that are out in the field. They're the ones who are talking to the customers. They're the ones who are in the nitty-gritty of programming or looking at the actual projects. So you do want to you want them to be able to write about what you know they should be writing about. So you could ask them what projects they've been working on. Is there a project summary they want to write about? Are there issues that customers have wanted to talk to you about? Was there somebody on site who pulled you aside? Did you recently get a question via email, or what phone calls do you seem to keep getting? Those can generate some ideas. Or what have you been reading about? Or what have you been listening to in podcasts? What have you been seeing at trade shows? What are the topics that you are talking about? And then they could report back on that. But it is also good to have some voluntold topics, even if the topics are not specifically assigned. We do try and get like some guidelines. So if you have corporate goals that are to get more robotics projects, or you have corporate goals that are to expand in a particular industry, then you might say, I need somebody to write something about robotics, or I need somebody to write something about food and beverage, or who has something that would speak to one of these topics. Another thing that we do is we'll sometimes take the list of recent project closeouts, bring those to the blog meeting and say, all right, is there anything that we can write about here? Is there anything that we can write about here? And that will get some ideas going. And then you may have some hot topics that you just know need to be talked about. We know that a lot of our customers need a little more education on IoT or on Industry 4.0, or we know that cybersecurity is something that we need a lot of people to have some more information about. So we might bring those to the blog lunch and say, I need somebody who's going to volunteer to take one of these.
Yep, Megan, just let me just tag on to what you said. Yep. That's all great points. I think the other thing is think about in producing this content. It's the old elephant, eating an elephant, right? Do this in bits and pieces. Keep an ear to the rail on what people are talking about in the office and take a note. And sometimes you might pick up little bits and pieces. So, instead of necessarily always saying, here's how we did this project, maybe just bring up one little aspect of how do you approach a project? What made this particular project successful? And I think that sometimes you don't always have to come up with this gigantic beast of a story before you tell it. Think about kind of how you approach a project. It's probably your engineers are doing agile instead of a waterfall type of development. Think about doing that in a marketing way, in agile marketing, of releasing bits and pieces, small stories, little things like this, versus thinking about, geez, this is overwhelming. I can't tell the story until I've put 3 months into this blog article or something like that. That might be an analysis of that. But just, think about breaking things up into little pieces.
Absolutely. And sometimes we'll get the feedback too, like, well, we already talked about robotics. We have 3 blogs about robotics. And I think that analogy that you're saying about the elephant, right? That's a big thing. There's still, even if you have written about robotics before, I'm sure there is another topic that you could discuss, because these blogs, for example, don't need to be long, 300 words maybe, like 3 good paragraphs. So exactly like you were saying, break it up into different things. Don't assign to one person. If you could just discuss the entire topic of Industry 4.0 for me in a blog by the end of the lunch, that would be great. That's overkill, right? So exactly, breaking it down and discuss it. We find a lot of success discussing around the table with a topic that big. All right, I could write about this. I could write about this. You write about this. Oh, you did that project. And that does generate a lot more ideas.
Yep. One more quick tangent on that is as you're gathering these ideas, think about maybe developing an editorial calendar so that you can look at the full year and breaking this up. Because if you just really kind of have the foresight of what blog article is in front of you, then I think it's going to be a lot more challenging. So HubSpot and a lot of other marketing agencies and companies out there have free tools out there where you might want to use an editorial calendar or some sort of plan, right? Even just a simple spreadsheet or a simple Word doc to kind of plan out your year and what do you want to talk about. And this is where maybe this ties into your voluntold type of column here.
Yes, exactly. All right.
That's all the tangents I have.
So we have your topics. You have your topics. You've mapped them out on the calendar, and of course you want to leave yourself some room for something that comes up. But then it's the topic of like actually writing, right? So I have this great idea. I know about this project, and sometimes this is the block for somebody. They know what they want to write about. They can talk to you about it all day long, and they sit down in front of their computer and they look like this guy. Right? They completely go blank. They sit in front of the flashing cursor on the Word doc and they just have nothing. They don't know where to start. They don't know what to do. So one thing that we have also found success with is transcribing. So either I will call somebody and I'll take the notes while they tell me all about the projects and I can ask about it. So that would be like a live transcription thing. You also could have somebody who can ask the questions and you can record it, whether on your cell phone or on your computer. You record it and you can send that file off to a transcription service, and that's the thing that people do. You can either have somebody just talk about it, like the doctors used to do. I don't know if they still do that, but how the doctors talk into their little tape recorders. Or you could have somebody do an interview. And then Tony actually had a really great idea for if you don't, a lot of times you can get the transcription service for it's not very expensive.
Yeah, like $1 a minute, I think some of these.
Yeah, exactly.
Bad.
Maybe on Fiverr or on TaskRabbit or something like that. But you could also try it. Tony has this great idea, so I'm going to let him walk you through that right here.
And guess what? It's free.
Yes.
We all like free. So, hey, here's Eric Schaefer, and we did an interview with him at the Rockwell Automation Fair last November, and YouTube has a lot of built-in kind of cool tools. Maybe you haven't kind of dug deep in here, and maybe you already know about this, but it's maybe a repurposing of a tool that maybe you're not aware of. So in YouTube, it has some transcription services in here. Now, it's not perfect. We all know when we talk to Siri or Alexa or whomever, it isn't perfect, right? It doesn't quite get it. But, when we talk to sometimes trying to get someone to write an article or get something done, it's always easier to edit than it is to create, right? And so this kind of is that same philosophy. So you could upload a video, but you wouldn't even have to publish the video. You could just use YouTube, set the video to private, and just use this as a processing tool. But if you're publishing your video, obviously, then this is an extra benefit of that. So upload your video to your YouTube channel, and once you've got it uploaded, it's processed, which takes a few minutes to upload, and YouTube has to kind of process it. Then those little 3 dots on there, of course, you're logged in to your own channel. Go on to the next slide there, Megan.
Yes.
Click those little 3 dots. Now, if this isn't available, you might have to kind of go into your YouTube settings and make sure that this is set. But ours is, and I don't remember having to turn anything on or off. But if it's not there, you might want to dig into your settings a little bit. So YouTube automatically transcribes the text. Now, if something got garbled a little bit or somebody didn't speak very clearly, then it's probably not going. It's gonna butcher maybe a few words in here. So let's go on to the next slide here, and then it grabs or it shows you a little bit of a transcript. Now you can see this is Tony Verhoeven with CSIA, and it said 2400. So apparently I'm a number now, just a number. But so it's not perfect, or maybe I had mush mouth. I don't know, but it's pretty good if you grab that. Now you're going to copy paste that. You're going to put that into a Word doc or Notepad, and of course you're going to have to strip some carriage returns and clean it up. But it's not bad. So to sit down in front of your president or your project engineer and put a phone or microphone in front of him or her and get this down, it's going to get you, I don't know, 85, let's say 85%, which is pretty good. Instead of saying, "Here, boss, go write about this," and they may never get to that. So that's kind of like my big tip of the day. That was a pretty good tool, and again, it's free.
It is. Great, thanks, Tony. So the next step is to reuse what you have. A lot of times your engineers actually already have written, they just haven't written for a blog post, and we can take that writing and copy paste our good old friends, Control-C, Control-V. So either questions that you've answered in your inbox that people keep asking you and you've already typed that out, you might just have to clean it up a little bit, add a little intro sentence, add a little closing sentence, title, and you could be done. A lot of times when you have great information on your sales sheets and your proposals, I mean, the content that you want on your website is the information that you want people who are going to be your customers, hopefully, to have in front of them, right? So it is very similar information that you might be giving on your sales sheets and your proposals that you would want somebody to know. If they knew that sooner, maybe that would help them make a decision. So you could copy and paste paragraphs straight from your proposals there. You could take different sections of your sales sheets and expand upon them a little bit, add a few more pictures in, just put it in a different format. And then customers love case studies, right? Like I'm sure you have done the same thing where you have gone to a website, whether it's for something at work or a contractor or somebody like that, who you go and look at their work. You want to see what they've done. Especially if you're following the best practices of the CSIA, I know that you have project summaries that you do at the end, right? You have a project closeout statement, you have a meeting, and you probably have taken some notes about that. So you can take that information and just turn that into a blog post, turn that into a case study. Again, maybe have to add a few more sentences, maybe have to change the tone so that it's more external than internal, but the information is right there. And then another idea is to do recurring topics. So this is sort of on the same theme of setting aside the time to get everybody together to talk about it. Having a recurring topic or having a recurring type of content that happens does help get more content out there. And sometimes it just makes it easier. Once you get in the habit of it, it makes it easier for your engineers or your president or whoever to write. So for example, a lot of our clients have a monthly newsletter. So that means the last day of the month or whatever day you choose, it's happening. So that can be a good motivator to get that out there. And it's a very similar format. It's a very similar pattern. You just have to put in the same information. Or Tony was talking about somebody who he knows who does like an Ask Gary sort of thing, where it's you're triggered by every time somebody sends in a question, he'll publish it. And Tony, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about how that works.
Yeah. We'll give props to Gary Stern, Canary Labs, one of our partner members. I see all the time in my LinkedIn feed, Gary's answering a question. And whether they're real questions or not real questions, I don't think it really matters. But because he's answering frequently asked questions that or objections or things that people have. So he's putting out his personality, putting out his face, his logo, and their philosophy. And logos don't do business with other logos. People do business with people they like, know, and trust. So this is a regular, very easy way to, if you get a question in either through your website or maybe you hear these things all the time when you're sitting in front of a prospective customer. Tackle that, right? Listen for that sort of thing, and then put that out there on LinkedIn and your website, or make that a weekly blog or something like that. Or guess what? Do it on video. Grab your phone and answer it in person. Put it on your YouTube channel, your Wisty account, or something like that. So it doesn't have to involve a lot of time. And I love that whole ask me, that Dear Abby type of or Ask Gary type of aspect. It's very simple and doesn't require a lot of time on anybody's part.
Exactly. And when you have the same format and you have sometimes a trigger if somebody is actually sending that in, that, again, it makes it a lot easier for your engineers or somebody else to write about it when it's the same type of thing every time. And exactly like you were talking about, Tony, with rethinking the content, that is actually our next tip, right? So we talk about blogs, we talk about case studies, we talk about this writing thing, but really if it is you don't have to write. Writing is not the only thing, it's not the only type of content that you can do. So sometimes people may feel much more comfortable in a different type of content, a different medium. So video, of course, is huge right now. It does very well right now. And it doesn't need to be very fancy. If you have a decently lit room and an iPhone with one of those, whatever, $6 little tripod things, you can do a video. It doesn't need to be super fancy. Like Tony was saying, you can just sit down and say, hey, I got this question, here's what I got, and do a short little video. You also could get more involved. You could get a screen sharing type thing or a screen recorder where you walk through a piece of technical content, a piece of a tip or a trick for programming, or show somebody how to do something. And then your engineer doesn't even need to be on camera. They can just talk. If we know that you have an engineer who can talk but doesn't want to be on camera and doesn't want to write, then this could be a good option for them. Other types of content that are doing very well right now, infographics still are doing quite well. You can build those very easily in a site like Canva, or even in PowerPoint you could make one. So if you have somebody who doesn't like to write but is very good at, for example, designing an HMI and creating an infographic for somebody isn't all that different. So that might be a different way that somebody might feel a little bit more comfortable getting some information out there. Or podcasts. It's Tony's favorite topic, so I'm going to let him talk about that one.
It's my new toy.
It is.
It's super cool. In fact, podcasts are, even though podcasts have been pretty ubiquitous for the last 10 or 12 years, they're still in a huge high growth stage. It seems like everybody has a podcast, and that's okay. Everybody's got a blog, but I think as we're seeing more and more, we used to only have 3 channels, and now we've got hundreds of channels. But everybody's carved out their own little niche, their own little messaging, and as a result, their own little audience. So I did a search. Turns out there's not an industrial automation podcast, at least that I could find. Now there have been episodes of other people's podcasts that are not in the engineering world that were had mentioned or talked about certain aspects of industrial automation, but there didn't seem to be one that was focused on system integration and manufacturing. And so, hey, let's do this. Let's get the word out. Let's talk to our business owner members, and that's what we did. And so we're 7 episodes in, and talking to our system integrator members each week. And I just got an email or a LinkedIn message this morning from someone who said, hey, I just found your podcast, and I listen to it every opportunity I get. So I think the reach of video and podcasts it's a little intangible right now. It's really hard to know how far it gets out there, but do not underestimate putting it out there and finding your own little niche and developing over time your own audience. Again, through blogging, through posting things on LinkedIn, posting things on podcasts. If you keep it up, you will develop an audience on this. So podcasting does require a bit of setup time and work I guess up front, but does not require a huge amount of equipment. I'm currently doing it with, my computer, some free software, a phone, and an iPad. So we have not invested zero money at this point in equipment. So it does not take a professional studio to do a podcast. So I could talk. We should probably do an episode maybe on just podcast and video and things like that.
Yes.
That's a separate thing. But so I won't go too far off the rails.
Yes, because I could talk a little bit more about that also. But yeah, exactly. For engineers who the writing is the problem, and the ideas are not, then the podcast could be another way for them to get into that. So to recap, a couple of tips that we have for you are 3 T's, 3 R's. You got to set aside the time, because if you don't put it on the calendar, it probably won't happen. And a little extra encouragement by way of food or other types of incentives never hurt, especially because once you get everybody in the same room together, you tend to get more ideas than, of course, if you have 1 or 2 people sitting in a room. Topics. Some volunteer, some voluntold, have a balance of both. Transcribe. If somebody doesn't want to type, they don't want to do the writing, but they want to do the talking, then there are several ways that you can do that. A reminder to reuse what you have. If it's in one format, that doesn't mean that somebody's going to find it in another format, so it is perfectly fine to reuse things like sales sheets and things that you've already written to turn that into content. Have recurring topics so that you're in a system, you're in a routine, and it's expected and it's easy to keep up with that, and to rethink your content. So it does not just need to be writing. It can be other media such as video or pictures or audio. So a couple other tips and tools that we have for you. We have a blog worksheet that we have set up as a download, as a free download for anybody who is on this webinar. You can go to rivergatemarketing.com/don't-write. And that is just a little bit of a scaffold for your engineers who are writing to think about how to take the information that they know and put it in a way that it is understandable to an audience. So it asks questions like, what is the working title? But then also, if you had to talk about this in one sentence, what's the most important thing that somebody should know? It also asks, like, who is your audience? Is it plant engineers? Is it plant managers? Is it future employees? Is it somebody else? And it has a couple scaffolds for ways to set up the writing on there as well. So a lot of our engineers have found it great as they write their first, maybe 2 or 3 blogs, and then maybe they don't use it, but it might be a good tool to get you guys started. So you can find that at rivergatemarketing.com/don't-write. YouTube for transcription, Tony just went through, and then Tony was also talking about content calendar. All of our clients we use Trello with all of our clients at this point. It's a great tool. It kind of looks like a digital version of index cards, and you can paperclip, quote unquote, anything you want on there. So you can put a file on there, you can put your pictures on there, you can write comments on it, and then you can sort them into different lists. So then you can take something, you can use it as your brainstorming tool in the first list, and then you can just drag it over when somebody's claimed that topic, and then drag it over once they've added their draft to it. We really like that. It's really easy to see what we have on our plate, what's ready, what's not ready, and it's a great way to organize your content once you do have your engineers writing.
Trello is great. If you've not, again, it's free. Of course, it is a freemium model. There are things you can pay for, but it's great, especially across teams. If you have things that you can manage across teams and multiple people. But I don't use it like a daily to-do list. I use it for like bigger, larger projects. Like someday I'm going to get to, I have a someday list, a great idea list, or maybe a great idea list, and then kind of active things that are going on. So the marketing team here at CSIA, I can't do everything, and neither can any one of us. So there are definitely some team ups that we can do, and knowing the status of them and where they're at is super important. But for us, I don't always use it for kind of like this little minutia, the little nuts and bolts types of things. It's usually like this bigger idea. Oh, this white paper, I want to get this white paper done. This white paper idea is a good idea. What's the status of that? And then break it down into all the different things I need to collect and research before we can actually write that. So for me, it's usually kind of a big idea kind of project manager.
Yeah, it would be good, for example, like you were talking about the different sides of the elephant and different people taking different pieces. We've used it for that also. That's another really good one. You can look at, I can see that person's document and see where they stand on it and look, okay, that's what they're writing about. All right, I can kind of take it from there and run. So yeah, those are 3 good tools, all free, that you could use. So from there, we just have, if anybody has any questions or other suggestions about what's worked for them.
I'd love to hear if there's any questions or maybe some concerns from some people. I have a question from you, Meghan, or for you, Meghan, because maybe I'm speaking on behalf of some of our participants today. But
sure.
How important is it? So say you're a marketing manager or business development rep. You're on the call today, and you're like, yeah, great, but all my engineers on our team are billable, right? Of course they are. So how important is this to get, I guess, buy-in from management, right? So that you've got to find some time in here to do this, so you're not obviously doing an interview instead of programming for an hour.
Right. Yes. So yeah, I mean, you do have to, there does need to be some buy-in, and it does, there's kind of 2 sides of that, right? Most of the clients, I mean, one thing is if we are working with a client, we're a marketing department, a marketing agency, then there already is a little bit of buy-in there. So I guess we do have a little bit of a head start on that front. But an hour a week at some point, whatever you're billing is not going to exceed your return on this. It's not going to be every blog, and it's not going to be every white paper, every piece of content, but we have seen at least I can think of 5 or 6 right now where we put out a piece of content that just hit at the right time, and we had a $400,000, $500,000 project proposed within a week. So, you can get there are ways to get the buy-in. The ROI is definitely there. That's a $400,000, $500,000 is a lot of billable lunches. So it's a lot of pizza. You could spring for Thai food. So so from that standpoint, I think you can find the ROI. And like I said, it's not going to be your first. It's not going to be your first one. But even that one project did pay for a lot of the previous blog launches, all of the previous blog launches very quickly. So there is that side of that. And then in terms of, we have these blog launches that are set up recurring, but there are times when we cancel them because everybody kind of has their really busy time, and then you get a couple weeks every once in a while, most companies, where you have, your utilization isn't that high. For a week, for whatever reason, you're waiting on something for one of the larger projects or whatever. There's usually a time of year where things slow down a little bit, and so then maybe that's the time to do the blog launch because you've got people who aren't billable anyway. So scheduling them and when to roll it out, that would be something to consider also. Don't roll it out when you're at your very, very busiest.
We lost a bit of our question and answers part of the webinar, so it seems like a bit of an abrupt ending, but it was a good stopping point. Thanks, Meghan, for being our guest. If you have any questions or comments, email me at podcast@controlsys.org, controlsys.org. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe in iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd also appreciate a like, share, and comments about what you hear. Visit csiaexchange.com/podcast for a full list of episodes, to subscribe, or to contact us. We'd like to hear what topics you want to learn about and who you'd like to hear from. Music provided by bensound.com under a Creative Commons license. This is a production of the Control System Integrators Association, CSIA.
Thanks for listening to the Talking Industrial Automation podcast. Read the Industrial Automation blog and find and research qualified system integrators at csiaexchange.com. For more information on why your system integrator should be CSIA certified, visit controlsys.org, controlsys.org.